truth,
love,
and the good.
Here we go.
Welcome to the DTPHD Podcast. This is the very first podcast. I'm David Tian, Ph.D., your host. So a little bit about me, in case you don't know, I've been over the past 10 years, almost 12 years now, a coach in relationships, lifestyle, masculinity, and I've helped over 100,000 different people around the world in over 87 countries find success in life, love, happiness, and fulfillment. And I'm on here with Henry Chong, my good friend. Hey, Henry.
Yes, hello.
We are right now on the opposite sides of the world. I am in Toronto. He is in Hong Kong.
And I'm in Hong Kong.
Hong Kong. All right. But we are making this work through the miracle of technology. Can you tell us about yourself, Henry?
Well, I suppose I do quite a lot of things, but my primary job is working for Fusang, the Asian family office. And we try and help families look after their wealth holistically, ranging from setting up structures like family offices to investment management, which is what I spend most of my time doing. But I guess on the side, I think a lot about life and how to live it. I have degrees in philosophy, politics, economics, and behavioral science, largely just out of personal interest. And I've known you, David, for a very long time, and I've always enjoyed the chats and conversations that we have talking about, well, life and love and the universe. So excited to be here.
Awesome. Likewise, man. As you know, this is called the DTPHD Podcast, but I invited Henry on because I always love talking to him. And he stimulates good conversation and parts of my brain that may not be as well used as I'd like. I have a Ph.D. in Asian philosophy and, Asian cultures and philosophy, a dual degree, as well as 3 master's degrees, and been pretty much in the university settings for half my life. And in a certain way, I'm still in education. So I love the podcast format. I have another show called Man Up, Masculinity for the Intelligent Man, and it's primarily on YouTube, so it's a video show. And one of the things about the format is we get questions that prompt answers from me, and then we record them. But I found I've been doing it for like a year and a half or around there. And what happens is I'm limited by the questions I get. And then I thought, why don't I just record something based on what I want to talk about? And then I was like, whoa, you mean I can talk about anything? And then I realized that the video format may not be as good as the podcast. And then I wanted to bring Henry on so we can get some good discussion here. So welcome.
And here we are.
Yeah. This is, we've decided for the first episode to talk about a topic that is relevant to everyone. And it's one that I get asked a lot, which is about happiness, self-fulfillment. Happiness not in the pleasure sense per se, but more of like joy, contentment, fulfillment. And wrapped in there is self-esteem and other issues like that. So the big question of how to achieve this state of feeling good about yourself and the world and your place in the world. And that's how we'll start off. And there are a lot of different ways to go at this, but I know Henry has done graduate level work and has a large degree of personal interest in studying the behavioral sciences on this subject. And he's got this really great newsletter that is in his email, if you can subscribe to his Fusang email, where a lot of it actually, you're educating investors and people in, I'm not sure how you would describe them, like high net worth individuals who are, and you're helping them think about how to make decisions better. And
exactly,
making good decisions is a big part of becoming happier in life. So I've talked enough. What do you have? Where would you take that?
Yeah, well, I mean, speaking about families, and primarily we do look after families, and families are substantive wealth. But one thing that I always tell them is that, by definition, the people who come talk to us are already very wealthy in a very traditional sense. But that doesn't mean much if you're not wealthy in, as you put it, the happiness sense. Because let's face it, ultimately, that's what we're all chasing. That's what we're all pursuing. Money doesn't mean anything intrinsically. Money is just paper, or more commonly these days, just ones and zeros in a computer. You can't even touch it anymore. But what we like is, ultimately the emotions that we think we will feel if, for example, money can purchase, whether it's certain goods or certain states. We think it might give us peace of mind. It might give us the luxury to live a life that is, more on our terms, perhaps. But at the end of the day, when you get right down to it, the things that we're always looking for are emotions, right? We want to feel a certain way. If you feel, complete zen all the time and calm, you feel happy all the time. I mean, these are, for many people, ultimate objectives. And certainly, I'll tell you, there are a lot of very, quote unquote, traditionally wealthy people out there who are very unhappy, who do not feel a sense of calm or peace. And quite frankly, in many ways, you might look at their lives and say that, maybe they don't have it all figured out. And the truth, I think, is that, certainly modern society has been so geared towards finding this sort of success in a traditional sense that we've forgotten, as Tony Robbins might put it, the art of fulfillment. We've forgotten about how do we actually feel happy, how do we live in good states. And I think those are very key questions. I think maybe a good place to start our discussion is before we can talk about the actual nuts and bolts of how to achieve happiness, which I think is critically important. I think it's worth talking a bit about, what we mean by happiness. You use the word happiness and everyone nods, and of course it's something we all want, but oftentimes people will mean slightly different things. Philosophers, like John Stuart Mill, will separate happiness from what they call pleasure, right? The what they sometimes call the lower pleasures. You eat good food, you have good sex, it feels good, but those can be often very momentary, fleeting pleasures, versus what the philosophers will sometimes call the higher pleasures, the pleasures of, virtue or spirit and things like that, what they sometimes call eudaimonia, the feeling of happiness and well-being. And I think the actual discussion of different types of happiness and all of that is not actually always all that relevant to, living the day-to-day life. A lot of philosophy, especially today, analytic philosophy, can be too caught up in definitions and technicalities and lose sight of, what it actually means and how to achieve it.
Yeah. Well, eudaimonia is an amazing concept. I first learned about that in Nicomachean Ethics and Aristotle. And then we take it forward into, in the Enlightenment period, a similar theme of the pleasures of the mind. And I think as an academic, my whole social circle for like 15 years were nerdy academics. Maybe nerdy is going too far, but academics who find their life fulfillment and their meaning for life in the mind, and they don't and they find themselves. They may not even. Most of them are not aware of the fact that they're largely unfulfilled because their bodies are not being taken care of, and to treat your brain as a severed, as a command unit of your whole body, your whole life, is a typical way of people thinking about life. And I think one of the reasons why eudaimonia, as if we were to translate it to some modern version of it, like the happiness of the spiritual or mental side, a lot of people just aren't that smart. I think like that's one of those things that like they're not that. Well, the thing is like what really struck me about researching the word success, which I had to do for marketing reasons, figuring out what that meant when people heard that word, was that it was almost exclusively in terms of money and things, or net worth if you don't even have the money or the things yet. And it was astonishing because this is a relatively recent use of the success terms, to think of it solely in terms of material accomplishments. And to actually have to then say there's this art of fulfillment is really sad to me. Like, so there's the art of fulfillment, and Tony Robbins would say there's the science of achievement. So achievement is one thing, but I mean, like the fact that we have not been making achievement and fulfillment about our emotions. Yeah. This is pretty new. Like in the Industrial Revolution, that was sort of this breakage that started us off on thinking of ourselves as individuals that could get outside of our social class. And so now we can be anything we want. And then success actually really meant something. Because if you didn't become the top dog, then you weren't successful, or that you weren't as successful as you could be. Whereas if you were thinking in terms of, especially like India in a caste system, you wouldn't think that you could move up in castes. It just wasn't available to you as a mental possibility. So what success meant for you was something like you had a nice family, you enjoyed your day, you had a good harvest, and no one died. Like, that was a good day and that was successful. And we're just killing ourselves over this idea of success as being linked to money. And it's something that I think anybody who's plugged into the internet feels as a temptation. So even if, like myself, you think intellectually, I have these pleasures. I love the pleasure and the flow that comes from reading a great book. And yet when we go into like, what are we supposed to be doing now? We're driven to create more wealth, or to create more stuff, or a legacy, so that we will be remembered in the future in a good way. And this seems like a dead end. But I don't think most people realize that. Maybe they haven't gone as far.
Yeah. I mean, one thing I can tell you is that, no matter how rich you might get, there's always someone richer. There's always someone stronger and faster and better looking with more
Mm.
cars. And, certainly in the age of the internet and Instagram, FOMO, I think, is a very real and powerful thing. A lot of people talk a lot about the internet and social media and living in the 21st century in a connected world. None of this is new, right? Coveting thy neighbor's goods is certainly nothing new. The only difference now is the scale of it and the accessibility of it. You wake up in the morning, you sit on the loo, you can pull out Instagram and you can look at what you perceive to be people having, quote unquote, a better life, and you want it. And that can be poisonous, right? That letting ego drive things, I think, can be poisonous purely because for many people, if you take a step back and think long and hard about it, those things are not things that truly make you happy. I was talking earlier about how I think it is useful to define, perhaps happiness and pleasure as two separate things to begin with. But at the same time, I'm not sure that it is also that worthwhile to dig too deep into the definition of happiness per se, because as Marcus Aurelius would say, a lot of people, what the good life is. You just need to live it. A lot of us know when we're happy, right? It's not something you need to think about in an analytic, a definitional sense. You know when you feel good. You know when you feel calm, at peace. You know when you feel passion about something. Really, the problem is most people just don't know how to get there, or they try and reach for happiness, and all they end up is, finding the pleasures to try and fulfill them.
Yeah.
I go on Instagram, I feel unfulfilled, so instead, I will order junk food and watch Netflix and make myself feel better.
Well, how much of it is a sort of hierarchy of needs, like a Maslow kind of pyramid, where when somebody is in his 20s and he sees what's happening or he sees people on Instagram that are living it up with lots of pleasure, he feels that he needs to attain a certain amount of money to feel good about himself and to finally celebrate. How much of that is actually something that is needed? As far as the hierarchy of needs, you would assume that someone shouldn't be starving to the point of death, right? For us to talk about happiness. So you feed the person and then you give them water and then you give them shelter, you give them some clothes so they're not freezing or whatever. And now they have their basic needs met. At what point are the basic needs met? And then we can talk about these higher level goods, because there's a huge gray area in between where most people are at who would be listening to this.
I mean, so I think the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is definitely true. Yes, if you're focused on, just trying to find food or shelter or warmth, it is that much harder to focus on the higher needs. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that the pyramid can't be jumped, so to speak. It's not that hard to think of examples where someone, forego the comfortable life of food and shelter in order to go off to war, for example, and, for better or for worse, fulfilling what he perceived to be a sort of a higher need. So I think that, yes, the pyramid is true, and more so, quite frankly, most of us living in modern societies, anyone who has access to an iPhone or a computer to listen to this podcast, you have all of your basic needs fulfilled already. In fact, the bigger problem may come. I mean, no one in most modern societies starves. The problem is that people are overweight, people are not healthy. So people are not fulfilling their basic needs, even though they could be. So, we live in a weird society when it's not that hard to get our basic needs fulfilled, but many people still neglect them.
Yeah.
But, that's, health and modern society, I guess, is a whole nother podcast.
Well, when you see that somebody is addicted to food, so clearly that's the need there is an emotional need that's not being met. And so, you're right. We can go a whole other route with that. But bringing it back to Instagram and the internet, one of the big dangers now with the connectivity, so somebody in Bangladesh can hop on the internet and see how how people are partying it up in Vegas and then start to covet that. Whereas that wasn't available to that, I don't know, it could be a villager in Bangladesh. It wasn't available to that person before. And so they didn't feel that need or that drive to be that. And so there's that villager, but now there's people right next door, like literally the neighbors of the person living it up, or down the neighborhood, and they feel like they need to have that lifestyle right away, or they don't feel good about themselves. I didn't grow up that way. I'm 40. You're coming up. You're in your late 20s, right?
Yep, 27.
Oh my God. Okay. I always think you're older than you are. All right. So you're in that generation where you have this, you feel this thing. Because I hear it in various videos or podcasts that I follow, people calling in who are 22 and saying they haven't made it yet and they feel really bad about themselves. So they gorge on ice cream or something to comfort them. What's the deal with that? Like, why are people feeling like they need to compete with the top 0.01% of living it up?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's two things, right? Again, it's the fact that now it is easier to see these things than ever. So it is more in your face, and
Immediacy.
Of course, with
Yeah.
Instagram, for example, you see only the good side of things. You don't see the hard things, right? It's so easy to go on YouTube and look at sports people doing amazing things. And of course, 99.9% of their lives is spent in training. And by definition, if you're a sports person, in order to push the limits, in order to be the best, you must live a life of continual failure. That's how it works, right? But you just try and fail better each and every day. But we don't see that, right? We don't see the process anymore. All we see is the outcome or the end result, or we see the things, right? We see the cars, for example, and the houses on the hill. I think, one, we can see it easier than ever. And the other thing is that, well, we think it will make us happy, right? And again, that's why I come back to it. I think the important question is, how do we go about being truly happy? Because we all know what it feels like. The problem is most of us don't know how to get there, and the ways in which we think we will be able to get there just won't. There is nothing in the world, no thing in the world that will ever make you happy or fulfilled. Right? And at some level, I think most of us know that, right? Yeah. We've all experienced times when you've reached some goal that you thought was so critical. You talk about the 22-year-old, you worked all your life to get into college and you get that acceptance letter and you think, is this it? Right? Yeah. I thought that this was the mountain and if I just climbed it, it would be over and I would be happy. And life doesn't work that way, right? There's no thing that you will ever achieve or buy or own that will ever make you happy. The truth is, it's that, well, partly the process, but it's also, the living day to day, moment to moment. And by looking at Instagram, for example, and just always seeing things and wanting things, that grasping for things, it always focuses us on exactly that, right? Trying to grasp for these things or goals, when really the truth is happiness is in the living.
Yeah.
Not even the achieving.
Yeah. I think actually as well, when they're looking at Instagram, we keep picking on Instagram, but it could be any social media platform, that they're actually not focused on the pleasure. So you take that 23-year-old who's looking at, I don't know, Dan Bilzerian, that's an easy example, though it looks like he scaled back recently, but any Instagram star type of person who shows off their lifestyle and wants to have that pleasure. And what'll happen is they might decide to start doing a personal brand of their own and find it really difficult, because it generally is. And then they don't know what to do because they're 23 years old. So they haven't accomplished anything yet. They don't have any expertise really in anything yet. And they have this need to get a following and to lead this life. So they end up faking it. So I see this a lot on Instagram, the fake lifestyle, right? They're faking it. And they might believe that they're faking it till you make it, but it gets really dangerous. And I think the reason why they feel the need to fake it, because when you're faking it, you don't actually get the pleasure. So they don't actually win. Like the things that they're doing aren't going to lead to the pleasure that they're trying to get. I don't actually think that they're coveting the pleasure in the end. They're coveting the ego pleasure, if you call it pleasure at all. It's the stroking of the ego, which is really the unmet need of significance. They don't feel important enough yet. They don't feel like they've made it yet. They're not good enough yet. And they feel like if they get looked up to on Instagram, if they have a Lamborghini, it can show it off, or they can show off their vacation on a yacht or the big party, and people look up to them and either look up to them or covet their lifestyle, or envy them, or whatever it is, or jealous of them, then somehow that makes their life, like that makes them worthy or enough. And that goes back to shame, really, like childhood shame. Why don't you believe that you're enough yet? Why don't you think you're good enough yet? And most of the world is suffering from the shame, and this leads to a theme that all through my career now, at least now anyway, the one big message I'm trying to hammer home is your psychology is everything, which is what we've been talking about. You can get all of the material achievements that you've been spending your whole life driven to get, and you can get them all and still not feel the good stuff that you were hoping would be at the end of that. And the good stuff is not actually the pleasure. It's not the hedonism, the standard hedonism. It's not the enjoyment of the yacht or the enjoyment of the party. Because if it were that, it would be like a pure enjoyment. That person would be like a kid, and he would probably be driven towards that. He would attract that into his life kind of naturally, and he'll just like kids find fun everywhere they go, right? But it's actually not the pleasure. It's the ego gratification, and it's not even that. That's even a low level of describing it. It's ego gratification, which will also be empty. What they're really looking for is a lasting sense of significance. Like they've made it, they are enough, they're good enough to be loved. That's what they're lacking in their lives. And that's a message that I don't hear anyone talking about. Instead, they're exploiting it. Like on the YouTube, you might have like Ty Lopez on that, like interrupting every freaking video you watch. And he's like, I'm in my garage, here's my Lamborghini, here's my lifestyle. Envy this lifestyle. If I can trigger enough dissatisfaction with your current state, you're going to buy this thing that I'm selling. And that really works on quite a lot of 20-somethings in America.
I think it works a lot on most people.
Yeah,
I don't think it's anything to do with age. I don't think it ever goes away.
I just keep wanting to pick on your age. It's so easy.
Yeah, but I mean, again, I don't think that this is anything new. Generation after generation has dealt with the exact same thing. It's just that now you have these twin prongs of age.
Well,
success feels more available than
here's
ever.
How it differs. Because I'm 40 now, so I'm going to defend my age. Here's how it differs. The average, because I also am straddling different markets. So in the dating advice world where I was for 7-8 years primarily, and I still dabble in that now, you got the 20-somethings coming into it, and they're just usually single guys who are struggling to get dates and get friend zoned a lot. And then you have the 40-somethings and 50-somethings who are coming out of a divorce. So, with 50 to 60% divorce rates, you get a bell curve, a reverse bell curve kind of situation. So you get a lot on the ends. And then in the 30s, they sort of disappear because they think they got it figured out and they don't need you. Yep. And then they come back when it all fails. And the people the guys in their 40s, they approach success and pleasure differently. And here's one reason why. And I'm starting to see this more as now I'm 40, is that it's harder to fake it. So what I mean by this is if you're 45 and you're still faking it till you make it, you probably suck at your job. Like, here's an example. I remember I think I started this in grade 3. I was assigned a project on Egypt. So you're supposed to write like a 5-page report on Egypt. Okay, so I went to the library and I got a book on Egypt, and I basically found a 10-page section on Egypt, I don't know, in the World Book or Encyclopedia Britannica. And then I condensed it to 5 pages, I think. And then I just copied it. I literally copied it out. Like, I'd copy whole paragraphs. And it'd be in prose that you wouldn't think any grade 3 student could ever write. But then, and then my older sister saw that and like, you didn't write this. And I'm like, yeah, I did. Or I don't even know if I lied to her or not. But I sent it in to the teacher and I got an A. Which is ridiculous. I got rewarded for plagiarism, and then that started happening. And even earlier than that, I was in a drawing assignment. I just took a really thin piece of paper, put it over some comic books, and then I just traced over the comic, and then I brought it out and like, hey, I drew this. And no adult believed I drew it, but they're like, yay, okay, and they just shoved it onto, and I was in this public school system that didn't really care about the students. This is a whole other thing. I'm really passionate about education of children, but they had 30 kids. So he's not going to take the trouble to find the source that I plagiarized and then confront me as a grade 3 kid. They're like, oh, this is cute. Okay, here's your rubber stamp, and go on to the next project. This continued all the way through until high school. At that point, the English teacher, he was starting to, he thought I was either a brilliant writer or that I was a spotty writer. Because when I plagiarized, it was awesome and he loved it. And I was smart enough to like sell that, right? And then when I hastily wrote my own thing, because I didn't have time to find a source to plagiarize, he was like, "Whoa, this is not you, David. I'm really disappointed by this." So I learned not to like be me. And then luckily I hit university, and then the professors really slammed that down. Like, I had a professor who was like, my grad student says there's no way you wrote this. And then I basically had to cobble together a bunch of sources and backwards engineer notes so I wouldn't get an F. And then he took it, but I realized, whoa, this is a warning signal. I can't keep doing this. And then there were courses where I just literally couldn't pretend. Like ones that weren't take-home exams or papers, that were actually at your chair. I didn't go that far to figure out how to scam those, but I do know people who have figured out ways, like they figure out the questions beforehand, they write them on pen inside their sleeve or something like that. But I never did any of that. And it was around the first year university mark where I couldn't fake my way anymore. And I learned that, just like in music, is the lesson I learned in music, if you don't have the chops, you can't fake it. So like if I can't play altissimo on the saxophone, I can't pretend like I do. Like you just literally physically can't pretend. And like in martial arts, you can pretend like, you know how to fight. And then you get into a fight and you can't pretend no more. Like it keeps you honest. Academia and Instagram and all these other platforms, they don't keep you honest, right? So, and a lot of youngsters haven't learned the lesson of plagiarism or not plagiarizing because they've been rewarded for plagiarism. So let's say you spend an hour doctoring a photo of yourself as, a hot girl, and you post it, and then you get tons of likes, tons of comments, and suddenly you get validation, and you think, yes, and then this you think your true self will not be appreciated, so you keep staying with your false self. And then 50 Instagram posts later, 500 Instagram posts later, you're still having to keep up the facade and the charade that this is you and it's not you. And then you don't know how to get out of it besides just deleting the damn thing because they don't reward you for your true self, all the mistakes, all of the, but you can't keep doing that till you're 40. So the 40-year-old is either out of work, or, so he's going to be pouring out of work if you kept that going. At some point in your adult life, you have to learn that there are certain things you suck at. And sometimes to get really good at, to get forward in life, you have to keep doing the thing you suck at, and it's not glamorous, and it's not rewarded while you suck at it. For classical Chinese was a great example, actually. Mm-hmm. So in class, when you learn classical Chinese, just like classical Greek, I think more people might know Greek, you have to translate. So you can actually get the translation. The works that you work with are usually translated quite often already. So you can read you can have on your lap, I suppose, if you really want to, if you're in a large classical Greek class, you can have the English out on your lap while you're looking at the Greek and the teacher's calling on you and you spot translate, but you're looking at it on your lap, like something stupid like that. Or you have an interlinear translation and you're not, you're faking it. And that will hurt you when you get higher up, because eventually you'll get to these texts that have no English translation, which is really what the professor should be assigning you. And then you're totally on your own. And in classical Chinese, you have no punctuation. So you don't even know where the sentence ends and where the next one begins. You don't even know sometimes if you're in a new text, because it's just running characters all the way down. And you're completely lost. You're literally, if you faked your way, you're literally, just looking at a bunch of random drawings, really, like characters, and it keeps you honest. And I learned that I have to, in this big lesson for me, which was I've had to learn, an advanced graduate student, because I was talking over dinner about whether he thought I was able to put one over on my professor because I didn't do the reading, but I faked as if I did. And then I think the professor knew, and this is what he said. And then I asked the advanced PhD student, like, what do you think? I was an undergrad and he was a PhD. And he's like, David, you're like a little ant in his hand. You're squirming around, you're hiding, you think he can't see you, and the whole time you're completely in his hand. And maybe he won't call you out because he feels sorry for you, or he sympathizes with you, or he was in your position, or he doesn't want to embarrass you, right? But don't pretend. Don't trick yourself to think he can't see you. And when I realized that, I just dropped all pretending completely. It was like my second year. So that first year of university where I really couldn't fake it anymore. And to the second year when I accepted the fact that I actually had to know this, like for real, that was a big shift. And I take that all through my life. So I think a lot of people, let's say they have a personal best on the deadlift, but in order to get that personal best, they have to do 10 minutes of rest, or, it's got to be, they can only do one rep. And so they set up the camera angle and they do all this other stuff in the background where they're cheating, or like the recreational steroid user, the same kind of thing in fitness, or that, like, for the girls, it's what do you call it? Like the photoshopping. And then they present that image out in the world. That is actually going to create defeat further on. And then they get frustrated when they can't get past the ceiling. And that's just part of, this is part of happiness. That you can't be happy if you're faking it. And you can't, the reason why you're faking it is because, and then follow my train of reasoning, right? So you're faking it because you think you need the pleasure of the ego gratification, which is really only felt because you have an unmet need for significance in your life, which is there because you were, as a child or in your formative years, you had this nagging doubt of your own worthiness, which is based on the fact that you have this fear that you're never going to be, that you're not good enough to be loved. And if you're not good enough to be loved, the fundamental fear is that you will die, the fear of death.
Yeah.
I take it from faking it on Instagram all the way to death.
Carol Dweck talks about it.
Yeah, Carol Dweck.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, talking about the difference between
The
sort of
growth.
the fixed and the growth mindset. You know, if you see people who are successful all the time and you begin to learn that only if, let's say, I show off these, Photoshop photos, I will be viewed as successful, then as you say, right, it becomes harder and harder and you've got to keep on keeping up the appearance versus, let's say if you are a power lifter and you know that the only way that you're ever going to get better is if you work to failure again and again and again, day after day after day. And there's this quote from one of the Batman movies that I've always liked when I think it's Bane who says that success has defeated you.
Oh, yeah.
I always thought that quite interesting.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And I think when you talk about experience, I mean, experience really is just undergoing defeat and trials and getting better, right? And I think there's nothing like the sort of the crushing shame of having something that you don't think you've worked for or something that you just sort of lucked into. And there have been so many studies about lottery winners, for example, who are incredibly depressed, often turn to drink or drugs or commit suicide. And I mean, I'm talking about, Powerball winners who win tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. They're some of the least happy people in the world. Why? Right? Why is it that they have gotten so much sort of stuff that everyone is chasing and yet they can't find happiness? I think, the simple answer is that, again, no stuff will ever give you the happiness or fulfillment that you're chasing, right? And you look at all these other people from achievements and you think if you can have those same achievements, you will be just as happy. When the truth is, those people who have undergone trials, the Olympic weightlifters or short track speed skaters who work their whole lives to get better, who go through 8-10 hours of training a day, failing. And then you see them on the rink that one time for that one glorious minute of success, and you see the happiness that they have afterwards. The happiness that comes not because they've gone and won a gold medal, although I'm sure that's great. The happiness comes because they've undergone the pain and the suffering and the trials, and through it all, at the end of it all, when you triumph, it becomes that much sweeter because not only have you overcome the difficulty, but you now know that you're the kind of person who can overcome that difficulty. Right? You've been tested, and after being tested, it's revealed that unshakable core in you. Right? I need to fail at doing a 100-kilo deadlift again and again before I can make it. And once I can make it, it's not so much the fact that, I can lift 100 kilos now. It's the fact that I have grown literally and physically to a state where I can now lift that 100 kilos. And that's something that no one can ever take away from you. Right? That's true confidence. When you have been, as you say, you've learned to play the sax for real. You've learned to do martial arts for real. And you don't need anyone to tell you that you know. And that's the kind of confidence that you can't buy. And that's also what I think leads to true happiness. When you have real achievements born of overcoming trials, but also growing into becoming, a better person. But I mean, as a counterpart to that, I think it's really, really important to also, actually remember to step back and smell the roses in the moment, to actually feel pleasure in the moment. And a lot of people just are on this endless treadmill of wanting more and more and more, including people who are high achievers.
Yeah.
It's, perhaps it's the ego, but it's just never enough.
Right.
And, that kind of eternal sort of grasping, I think it's just as dangerous. That right there is the challenge that everybody has always grappled with, from, Buddha to the Taoists, of how do you both sort of, let go of the grasping and learn to be happy with what is right now, what you already have, while at the same time continuing to execute and achieve. There are a lot of people who do, one or the other, right? Lots of high achievers who always want more, and we can tell that they're desperately unhappy. And there are lots of people who just check out of the world and sit on the beach and meditate. And again, they don't go anywhere. How do you do both? I mean, that's hard. But I think that they're not fundamentally incompatible. There is no reason why you can't do both at the same time. There is no reason why you can't continue to execute day in, day out while also being grateful for the process. And one example, and I mean, one example I've always found, I think we've talked about this in the past. I think the movie Pumping Iron, this documentary on Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh,
and
great
there's
example,
one scene in it. Exactly. There's one scene in it that I've always thought quite interesting. When, what's his name? The competitor. The young
played
upstart. Lou Ferrigno. And it cuts between scenes of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Lou Ferrigno training. And Lou Ferrigno is in the basement of, I think it's a Brooklyn gym. And his dad, who's his trainer, is screaming at him and saying, kill Arnold. And Lou Ferrigno is screaming back, and he's grinding out every rep. And he doesn't look happy, quite frankly. He looks like he's suffering. And he's grinding through it, and he's getting the workouts done. But, you can tell that he's not happy. And then you cut to Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he's in Gold's Gym, and he's on Venice Beach.
Yeah, and he's running on the beach. They're joking around.
Exactly.
It's bright.
He's with his friends, and you can tell it's hard, right? He's training hard, but he's also enjoying it. And he has this thing he says that, every rep I do, I'm happy. It's painful, right? I mean, when you're lifting weights and you're training to failure, it's painful. But I enjoy it because I know that every rep I do, as painful as it is getting me closer to my goals, right? And that's, where I gain my satisfaction.
Right.
So it's definitely possible. It's not easy.
Part of it is like Tony Robbins puts it in push versus pull motivation. So Ferrigno is in the movie, it makes his dad seem like he's really pushing him. But he was like haunted by the specter of Arnold Schwarzenegger. I must beat this man, or I am not good enough. And Arnold is being pulled forward with this vision that he's because he does a lot of visualization at that time, especially and while he was in Austria, of being I forget the name of the movie star who was also a bodybuilder that he looked up to, but being like that, being a bodybuilder in the movies, and that pulled him forward. So he enjoyed the process. And we keep mentioning Tony Robbins, but another great Robbins one was like, it's not about what you get, it's about who you become. And a big part of what you were just articulating there is along those lines. I love that you quoted Bain, but that's such an awesome point. The success has defeated you, or even the drive towards success can also defeat you. And the idea that happiness comes not from getting the thing, which so many of these, so a lot of the people I speak to they don't mind cheating. Like there's a whole subculture which is huge. So I don't even know if you call it a subculture or just the culture of hacking. Like hacking in a way where they don't want to earn it honestly. And you see this in business. So for many years, I was bogged down in the internet marketing world of direct response copywriting and all that stuff. And because most of the people in the industry of selling pickup artists and dating advice products were heavily in that. Or almost the only ones making money were the ones who were training in that. And a lot of it was, basically the business model is this, so in case you guys get suckered into this, and sometimes this might happen with an old product that I sold to a friend of mine or to somebody that I want to help out, and so they're still selling that product, and they might put a forced continuity product on there. And you see there's a guy that I used to respect, but who's still, he put out a nice ebook, so I like that guy, and he wanted me to sell his products as an affiliate, and the deal was, the offer was $1. So buy this whole ebook or video course for $1. And I'm like, gee, how are you making any money on that? But okay. And he says, you sell it for $1, I'll give you as the affiliate $50. And I was trying to figure out how that worked. So in his terms and conditions, it was buried in, when they write terms and conditions in all caps and it's buried somewhere deep in there, it says, by agreeing to this purchase, you also agree to a monthly product that's $89.99 and blah, 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 blah. Or if I forget, $99.99. And so this poor customer is going to buy it for $1 and then see on his credit card bill a month later, $100 charge. Like, what is this? And then the vendor is going to have to just get a new merchant account because he's going to get too many chargebacks. This is how the entire freaking industry works. I bought a product from a friend of mine, and because I do it honestly, and that it was a continuity product, and I had no problem with it because I wanted to support him. And then I tried to use a credit card about 2 years later, and it was declined. I was like, I haven't used this in 2 years. Why was this card declined? And they said, oh, sir, 2 years ago, there was a charge from so-and-so.com, which was my friend, and it was a fraudulent charge, so he canceled the whole card. I'm like, I didn't call in to cancel it. So in other words, his merchant account got flagged. Visa said, no, we're not going to take this. And I was just like, damn, man, that guy, he must have gotten so many chargebacks on this. And it's the cheater's mentality. If all of, so a lot of the Instagram, and again, I'm just talking about that platform, but it's not just that platform, but Instagram, the people that people look up to on there, they get to post the highlights of their life. And they may not be cheating because their lives that may be an accurate reflection. But so for every guy posting on there and is successful as an influencer or whatever, and is showing his lifestyle, there are going to be 1,000 youngsters or 1,000 people looking at that and saying, I wish that was me. What can I do to be that? And then that guy might sell you an ebook, or whatever it is, and you go and buy it and try to hack your way, cheat your way into it. And at the end, I know people who actually made millions as using a direct response copywriting model of business. And, they got away with 3 or 5 million in revenue before the market wisened up to their offer and stopped buying it because they got smart to the fact that they were being cheated. And then they're constantly coming up with new products, new things to do. And I look at that and I meet these guys, they have 3 million in the bank from scamming all these people. And I think, wow, like I know why now you use steroids in the gym as a 25-year-old. I get it. It's your whole freaking brain. And I bet you will cheat on your wife. It is a whole way of approaching, like you're just you don't want to earn it. You're going to want to figure out a way to cheat and hack your way through it. And I bet in the gym, you take long breaks, right? Like I bet you're like getting any cheating advantage you can. And eventually that will catch up. Like you might be 40 something, or you might, in an extreme example, you have Wolf of Wall Street. You can keep that up for quite a long time. But, eventually, maybe it's an assumption I have, but, maybe you could keep cheating all the way into your 70s and 80s. But I think that over the long run and the macro, like the honest truth will eventually get found out.
And you only need to get caught once.
Yeah. And more importantly, like you were saying earlier, your conscience has been seared. Like the amount of shame you have from not earning something and getting it, you don't actually get to enjoy it because first of all, you didn't earn it. And secondly, in the back of your mind, you cheated into that. So you get it. Like it's kind of the pleasure of somebody who robs a house. Like the pleasure of breaking into a house and going, yeah, I'm in this guy's house, but it's not your house. So you don't actually get to enjoy it and kick back and totally relax. You're just like, okay, the time is short because the owner might come back in the home and you're like Goldilocks and the Bears and you're just like eating everything you can or whatever it is, right? Because it's not your house. And that's how they inhabit life. I see this over and over and over.
Yeah. Well, and I see that right now in the financial markets, for example. And everyone wants things now. They want things quickly. People, you tell them you can make 20+% a year in the financial markets and they want it. You can tell them you can double your money in a year and they'll want it. You tell people, hey, if you can make 7% return every year across 10 years compounded, that will double your money. No one's interested, right? Even if you can do that over a lifetime, again, simple math. Compounding is a very, very powerful force. And, right now we're in year 9 of a bull market. It's been an awfully long time since the last financial crash, but people forget. And people begin to say, well, I see everyone else, making it big, making it well. I want some of that. I'm not willing to wait or be patient. And the simple truth is, within the financial markets, I think everyone wants the good life, but no one is willing to work for the good life. And it is work, right? Never mind if it's just, never mind the financial success, but happiness, we're talking about. Happiness is work like anything else. Building a good, loving family is work. Having good relationships with your friends is work. And you need to put in the time and the effort and the hustle like with anything else. And I think that happiness is an act is another thing. Talking about mind-body dualism, again, is probably a topic for another podcast. But happiness is an act as much as anything else. So much of what we feel, again, coming back to emotions, is physically encoded. You can do happiness. Again, we've all seen studies about how if you just smile more, you'll feel more happy. But it really does start with things as simple as that. Day in, day out, paying attention to how you live, whether you're healthy or not. It's very hard to be truly happy if you're running on 3 hours sleep and eating a crappy diet. It starts with these small things. The problem is these things are also very simple, and no one wants to believe that simple things can be the answer. Everyone wants to believe that it is something complex, and if only I can figure out the magic solution, I'll have it. No one wants to believe that, there isn't just some quick 5-step fix to get in shape. We all keep looking for it. We're not willing to accept the simple truth that, lots of things can work. For example, if you want to lose weight, you just need discipline. And I think that's true of life, of health, of happiness, of so many things. Again, right? Everyone wants the good life. And we all know deep down inside what it looks like, truly, right? We all know when we're truly happy. The problem is no one is willing to put in the work or have the discipline to go after it and get it.
Yeah. That's a great point. The cheaters don't have the discipline because they're not actually enjoying the process either. So like that point you were making about Ferrigno versus Arnie, which was we can end off on that. I mean, a lot of people are they think that they need to beat themselves up like Ferrigno, and then they don't want to do that, so they cheat as if they have it. If it's possible, they'll cheat, and it's pretty easy nowadays. And they don't actually get the enjoyment of either of the spoils of the reward, and they don't get to enjoy the process. So they lose out on every possible benefit. So I guess the lesson is, if you're not enjoying what you're doing for 90% of your day, at least, you got to look at your day, look at how you're spending your time. And
exactly.
Yeah, that's not a great way to live, but a lot of people do. And we can talk about next time how we do that for ourselves, and a lot of other things. There's so many topics I wrote down. I'm like, okay, we're going to go on down that avenue, get down this road, but we're trying to keep it more focused. So let us know how it was. It was our first podcast, so please be gentle. But I had a lot of fun. And we want to keep doing these for you. Let us know. Give us your feedback. Educate us so that we can improve in the process. How do they find you, Henry?
Well, you can find me on my personal website at henrychong.com, henrychong.com, and you can find everything else that I do from there. And I guess I'll leave off with just one last thought. A lot of people achieve thinking that it will make them happy, when the truth is we need to be happily achieving day in, day out, moment by moment.
Yes. Yeah, and to even reframe what achieve means.
Exactly.
Yeah, awesome. You can find me at DavidTianPhD.com, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Before you go, a couple last things. First, all the show notes and links to resources can be found at DavidTianPhD.com/DTPHD Podcast. Or you can just go to DavidTianPhD.com and find it through the top navigation menu. Second, if you'd like to interact with me or other like-minded fans of the podcast, then join our private DTPHD Podcast Facebook group. We've got an awesome community of intelligent, wise individuals from literally all around the world. You can send a join request to the group using the link you'll find in the show notes of every podcast at davidtianphd.com/DTPHD Podcast. Click the link, log into your Facebook, and then click to join. We approve join requests every day. So go to davidtianphd.com and click the link to join. See you inside our group.